I didn't know we had an energy problem. Did you know this? If you see the cranes that we currently have out and about in Costa del Sol, even if you times it by 10, it would still not be enough supply for the demand. Everything has changed and grown except the road.
The question is, will the infrastructure cope? Kian, all right. So as we said, the Costa del Sol has experienced tremendous growth in the last 20 years. You've seen a lot of changes. I have as well. But one of the things that you, especially in the summertime, that you notice is the strain on the infrastructure, traffic, that sort of thing. Let's talk about where we are today and where we're going to be if we keep growing at this rate.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
I'm happy we're sort of talking about this topic because it's not really discussed.
It's a pain point.
It's a pain point.
It's
of
a pain
course
point
it
for
is
the
a
coast,
pain
for sure.
point. Like it's one of the things that needs to be discussed and it's not talked about enough. So when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about sort of different things. No, we talk about roads, transport, healthcare, schooling, a bit of everything, right?
Yeah.
And housing, of course, housing among others. No, but one thing which we keep on talking about every morning, and it's something that keeps on coming up, is how few members of the team are late because of traffic.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, this is something recurring. Like when I was a younger boy, right? I'm still a younger boy, but when I was a younger boy, I used to go to school, there was hardly any traffic in Marbella. Like, I don't remember Marbella with traffic, right? Marbella Center, maybe a bit, right?
And now you don't remember one without it.
Pretty much.
Unfortunately.
Pretty much. So if you look at the N340, which is now called the A7 that connects Malaga to, down all the way to Casa de Manilva, this road has pretty much remained the same for like 60 years or 70 years. So if you look at like old aerial pictures of Costa del Sol, there's one we have in the office, which is of Calahonda in the 80s, Marbella in the 70s. Like everything has changed and grown except the road.
Yeah.
So like, it's an obvious infrastructure problem.
When was it built?
I have no idea, but like
we'll
the
find out. We'll put it in
I think it's like 1950s or something, something like that, right? It used to be a dirt track. And then it sort of gradually got a bit bigger, but it hasn't really grown that much in size. And then in the 90s or late 80s, when Jesus Gil, the mayor of Marbella, finally put lighting from the Fuengirola stretch to Marbella, and then it got a bit more popular. But it was at one moment known as the Death Road because it was so unsafe. Yeah. Something that jumps out at people that are not from the coast is the short accesses to the road because you don't have acceleration lanes, so you're straight from stop to go. Yeah. And people find that quite they have to get used to it.
What's a bit unsettling?
It's a bit unsettling at the beginning. Once you get used to it, you're fine. Yeah. So that's what we say about infrastructure. So we can start there. Like let's talk about transport. How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, case in point, I live in Fuengirola, and instead of taking the A7, I go in the opposite direction. I go up around and I pay for the toll road, which gets me here in perfect time, gets me here faster than the coastal highway does. And so I mean that's evidence of it being an issue. I mean, and there's a lot of traffic flooding in from Fuengirola into Marbella because I guess there'd be perhaps more jobs or better pay. I don't know. But so I go in completely the opposite direction in order to take the toll road, but it's you got to pay for it.
It's funny you say that. It's like for people that don't know the coast, what tends to happen is the road from Malaga direction Marbella is like super like heavy in the morning. It's rush hour, and it's because a lot of the people that live in Malaga work in Marbella and Estepona, so they all travel this way. But then in the evening, it's the other way around. So at 6, 7ish, you see on the way back to Malaga getting busy. So those are the rush hours really.
But that being said, I live not more than we call it a 10-minute walk to the Fuengirola train station. If there had been a train line from Fuengirola to here or even Marbella, I would take that every single day 100%. Without a shadow of a doubt.
That's like another infrastructure problem. Like that train line, which, the idea was, back in the days that would connect the entire Costa del Sol. Yeah. And they still sort of talk about that train. That train should not stop at Fuengirola. It should go all the way down to down to Gibraltar effectively.
Yeah. But imagine how powerful that would be.
That's another example.
It would solve so many issues. It really would.
100%.
Yeah.
So like obviously we have the A7 and we have the AP7, and those are the two only arteries that the coast has.
They're the only options.
That's the only option. So AP7, for those that don't know, is the toll road. You have to pay for it. It's a private concession that the Spanish government gave this company to build it, and they still have I think 20 years or 15 years left. I'm not sure what it is. And that price depends on the time of the year. So you can pay €4 in winter, you can pay €8, €9, or even 8, €10 in summer.
It's quite expensive in the summer months.
Yeah. So those are only two arteries. That's it. So a train line would accommodate that extra load, And one of the proposals which a lot of the small organizations of Malaga, Marbella have put together is to liberate that road. So to pay off that concession holder and to liberate it, so we would be able effectively to connect from the AP7. And funny enough, we were at that LPA event 2-3 months ago, and the mayor of Marbella, Angeles Munoz, was present. And she said that they have actually formally requested to the government that they liberate that, but that's very complex. Like, Spain's bureaucratic. I don't think we'll see that happening anytime soon. But then they would also have different realms of connection. So you would be able to take an exit from AP7. At the moment, you only have Calahonda and La Cañada and Fuengirola, Mijas, but you would also have suburban accesses, and that would just solve it. So if the infrastructure in transport remains as it is right now, like, it's just going to get worse and worse. They're going to be forced to do something in the next 5 to 10 years.
I wonder what the clincher is going to be. I wonder what's going to eventually, make the push come to shove.
Well, a few years ago, there was a very big problem with the Benalmádena access, and it took like 2-3 years of constant traffic jams until the central government said, you know what, let's invest in 20-30 million, and they just redid it. So
what did they really just added more access?
They added more access to it's the Arroyo de la Miel access a few years ago. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I do.
So but then you see other infrastructure that the government really invests well in. So obviously, in terms of transport infrastructure, we can't not mention the airport.
Yeah. Right? Which has come a very long way. I mean, I've seen multiple versions of it in the time that I've been coming here, which is my whole life, and more plans yet. Right? I mean, the latest expansion. Have you seen how big it is?
We covered it in a video with Kim a while back.
Yeah.
And it's gonna double its floor size, and passenger capacity from 25 to 35 million passengers a year.
Yeah.
That's 10 years from now. So 2029 plan. I don't know when the execution is gonna start, but that's an example of the central government taking action before someone says what to do. And that's quite interesting. Like, they're increasing capacity, so we're gonna have more people be able to arrive. But then what's gonna happen with the roads? Like, the roads need to cope with all that flow of people as well.
Not that you can compare, but I used to live in Beijing, and Beijing is quite well built because they have ring roads, which gradually get bigger and bigger. And then you sort of one is like massive circumference of the whole. I guess that could be an option. I mean, build another equivalent of an AP7 higher up than the AP7, which is sort of like an express highway that takes you.
Man,
but these are years-long projects. Years-long.
Then the other thing is public transport. So I think a solution is liberate the AP7.
Yeah.
So basically allow access.
That is the shortest route to
more access points to the AP7.
Yeah.
Finish the train line, right? Yeah. And then sort of reinforce. Start and finish. Yeah, exactly. Line. And then public transport. Like, if you will come to Costa del Sol, people that don't know Costa del Sol, the only form of public transport that exists is the train line from Malaga to Fuengirola. It stops there. And then the rest of the way, you need to use bus lines. And the bus lines, even though they were good, they're just not good enough. But imagine you had the AP7 open, the A7 well conditioned, the train line all the way down, and good bus lines would be perfect. The Costa del Sol is already amazing, but it would just make it even more amazing. You know, I think the infrastructure at this moment, it just won't cope if in the next 10 years nothing happens.
Yeah.
They need to do something.
But I think you're right. I think they're going to be pressured into it just by the sheer volume 100%. of, especially, increasing the size of the airport. I mean, they're obviously anticipating, and the popularity of the Costa del Sol continuing to increase.
Totally. And Spain in general is going to be increasing in population. Like, everything's growing in Spain. You know, there's no way they can't do it, And that sort of leads us very nicely into the next sort of infrastructure topic, which is healthcare.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the, good parts of Spain is that in Malaga, for example, on our coast, let's just talk about our infrastructure. So we have some big hospitals in Malaga, right? The Clínico and all those. We have and then we have
Benalmádena has a brand new one, which would be very nice. That's where we go.
Estepona also recently opened their one, but then the main one for where we are in Marbella is Hospital Costa del Sol that recently did their new expansion, right? So in terms of infrastructure of healthcare, you've also got, that's the public side, but you've also got a lot of private clinics and private hospitals. So of course, goes without saying, that can always be improved, but I don't think healthcare is that much of an issue. I think public healthcare in Spain is a bit slower. If you have to criticize it, I know people are going to comment, wait for hours in the hospital. Yeah, okay, fair enough. In some cases, I'm sure you will, but you still get attended, healthcare is cured, no matter what's up with you, healthcare is in Spain. So I think in infrastructure, healthcare, in the next 10 years is something that will grow, but I don't think it's a red flag. Transport, for me, is definitely a red flag.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, for those, viewers of ours that aren't used to a public healthcare system, what's nice about this market, so I used to live in Sweden, you only have the public healthcare system. You don't have a private system. Here, you have the choice. You can choose one or the other. And no, I completely agree. I think in terms of hospitals, clinics, that sort of thing, there's ample amount to sort of maintain and to sustain the growing kind of population of the coast.
100%.
For sure. Yeah.
So another point which is important in infrastructure is energy and power. No? And funny enough, we had that event which we just talked about where we were the LPA and one of the urbanistic chiefs of Marbella was there and he talked about energy. And surprisingly enough, he said, we aren't able to add more housing, right? Like a lot more housing until we fix our energy problem. I didn't know we had an energy problem. Did you know this?
No, not until that event. No.
So like it caught me on surprise. Like, whoa, I know we have a water issue, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but apparently like our grid can't take the amount of power it's currently consuming if the housing sort of increases at this speed. So one of the loopholes that developers need to go through now is making sure that their developments comply with latest like energy efficiency and sort of power requirements, because the Costa del Sol and specifically Marbella is having a hard time adding more housing to market because of the energy sort of infrastructure being a bit behind. So that's something that they're working on at the moment, and it goes sort of without saying, no? Like, we need more power.
Yeah. Another issue that comes up every single year is the lack of water. I mean, it's usually painted in a positive light in that, 340 days of sunshine every year, which is great, but that also means we never get rain or seldom get rain, and that creates water shortages. So that's an issue.
So we had a water shortage that was quite severe 2 years ago.
2 years ago, that's right. Yeah.
Right, and then but I have to say, like having lived on the coast my entire life, like we've had sequías before. Like in the times of my grandparents, right, it was quite normal to have big aljibes of water in your garden. So when there was drought, that you'd have water, and it's periods. Like you have 10 years of a lot of droughts, and you have 10 years of a lot of rain.
Well, 2 years ago, super dry, and then last year we got 3-4 weeks of constant rain, which is super unusual for here. But then the reservoirs all filled up. I mean, we were there not too long ago at one of them, and I mean the levels kind of, as you said, they replenish themselves.
So now the governments are working on different infrastructure to retain more water and to build more reservoirs. So they're looking at, for example, we have the Eastan Dam, which is working fine, and a few others. And the idea is to put some measures in place. So when we have the good years of water, that we can also retain more water. Yeah. So, like the drought of 2 years ago was quite severe, but it's nice that we seem to be back on track. So I think there's going to be works on water infrastructure as we progress and as the coast grows. But at this moment, it's not, I think it's something we'll deal with quite kind of okay.
Yeah. So if you've recently traveled to the Costa del Sol, first time here, or even if you live here, I mean, there might be a false sense that there's, enough housing because you've seen cranes everywhere, you're seeing a lot of development, you're hearing a lot about, well, certainly we do, we hear a lot about launches. Was that actually the case?
We covered this topic in a video this year where we invited in an expert in expert talks, and we talked about the housing crisis in Spain. And Spain is very undersupplied. So we don't have enough supply to put up with the demand that we currently have. So there's a massive shortage of properties for sale and properties for rent. And it's becoming a bigger and a bigger problem. So especially in the cities like Madrid and Barcelona, even more undersupplied. People that come to Costa del Sol, they'll think, look at all these cranes, right? Like there's cranes everywhere. But people need to understand that Spain went through a period where there was no construction. So to give you a bit more context, when I first started in real estate, I was 18 years old, so about 14 years ago. And from 2008 until 2016, so following the financial crash, 2008 until 2016, that's nearly, how many years is that? 8 years, more or less. In those 8 years, there was virtually no construction. So, from 2016, we started building a bit. We had developers like Telewimpy building on the coast again. And then in 2018, 2019, we started building again at normal rhythm, right? And then COVID happened, shook our system, took our inventory away, right? Not COVID, obviously, but the pent-up demand of those years. And now we're sort of catching up. So we've come from an era where we had practically no construction for nearly 10 years. And so, if you see the cranes that we currently have out and about in Costa del Sol right now, you would need to times them by 10. Even if you times them by 10, it would still not be enough supply for the demand. I mean, Spain builds around 90,000 properties per year. Well, we need 300, 400,000 a year. So, and this is a problem. But this not only is Spain; it's everywhere. It's not only Costa del Sol. It seems to be a European level. We're not building fast enough.
Would you say that a lot of the cranes that you see are, because I mean, we obviously we focus predominantly on selling new developments to international buyers. So we're seeing everything through the lens of foreign investors coming in. Would you say that a lot of the cranes that you see out there are being built, they're residential buildings being built for foreign investment necessarily?
Well, most depending where you are. So, if you look at...
Because the greatest demand will be for, Spanish nationals. I mean, that's what I think where the biggest shortages of developments being done, right?
In other parts of Spain. So like Costa del Sol, without doubt, is a very strong market for international buyers, and they're the predominant buyer, right? But if you look at Spanish statistics, and 5% of all transactions are foreign buyers. So, I don't remember the exact number, but I think in Spain there's around 690,000 properties sold per year, right? 5% of those are foreign buyers.
Yeah, so like minuscule.
But if you look at our Costa del Sol, right, given the nature of all of our relocators, it's amplified. Yeah. So, if you look at most of the constructions on Costa del Sol, most of them are for foreign buyers compared to other parts of Spain, like Cuenca, where it's like mostly national buyers. Yeah. But still, regardless, it's still an undersupplied market. And the properties which are being built in areas like Marbella are built to cater, in some cases, the luxury international market. So, one of the things we constantly talk about in the office, or, one of the points of discussion is, is the foreign buyer taking property away from the local? Well, in big figures, in Spain, they represent 5%, so no. But then in Costa del Sol, if a German buyer buys a penthouse for 1.5 million euro in Palo Alto, is that German buyer taken away from housing of a Spaniard? Well, no, because that's not the kind of product that a Spaniard would buy. You know what I mean? So that's that. But there is a problem with housing, and also with rentals, not only with purchase. Like people aren't able to. There's not enough rental properties for rent, and the current government are not really incentivizing rental programs. Or doing more for rental properties to come to market. What they are doing is constraining supply in a way, and also constraining people from renting properties from higher taxation, and then people will just actually not rent them out, or sort of keep them back. That's that. Construction, needs to continue, and what needs to happen for our infrastructure is we need more housing. There's no question. No matter where politically you lie in the world, we need more housing in Spain, and the only way for housing to be built sort of more streamlined or more faster is for Spain to liberate more land, because we've got plenty of land, to give us less bureaucracy, so to allow developers to build, to allow developers to compete. And then when we have an oversupplied market, like for example, as I hear, I'm not an expert in Dubai, but Dubai is an oversupplied market. It's very different. In Dubai, there's so much land, they liberate land and they make it super easy for people to build, right? In Spain, that's not the case. So, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change. And that's the problem. Yeah. So, and that's one of the driving factors of pricing. You're going to be, prices are going to continue to rise as supply is crunched and demand keeps on rising. So housing is something that needs to be worked on. There should be programs for younger families to access property. There should be, programs for younger Spaniards to be able to buy, 300, 400K, townhouses in Fuengirola, in Marbella. There's a thing called VPO, que es Vivienda de Protección Oficial, right? But developers don't build VPOs because they don't make money, and the state doesn't allow them to make money with them, so they're not built. But there's so many lands for VPOs. And a few years ago they were quite popular in Torremolinos and Fuengirola, and these are properties which are built for locals. But that's something that the government needs to work on. So that's my take on infrastructure in terms of housing.
Another important topic to discuss is schooling. Let's get into that.
So if you take your kids to school, you can have two options in Costa del Sol, public or private. The easiest thing, let's sort of take private.
And you've been in both, right?
I've been in both, yeah.
So you're speaking from experience. That's good.
So just private, very easy. You have so much variety of private schools, so many different, kind of schools: English, British, let's say, Scandinavian, Norwegian schools, Swedish schools. Yeah. You've got them all different
German
schools,
shapes, American schools,
shapes, sizes, everything.
From east to west, basically wherever you are, you'll find something.
Expensive, less expensive, premium, whatever you want, right? Yeah. So that's great, and you have the variety. So as an infrastructure, if you do bring kids to Costa del Sol, you come here to relocate as a young family, you have a variety of
options
of private
schools. We're going to be doing a video on schooling very shortly.
We're going to be doing a video on all the private schools. We're going to go super in depth about schooling because a big part of our audience are relocators and they want to know, right?
Yeah.
So that's private schools, right? Let's talk about public schools. So the nice thing is that local governments, depending which one we're talking about, so it's not the same to talk about Marbella than it is to Málaga, they're also reinvesting into their schooling. So the more recent schools, for example, that have been built a few years ago was the Elviria school, right just next to Mercadona in the area of what's the name? I think that's San Manuel. That entire area there where they've got a primary school. They've improved also on the secondary school of Las Chapas. So there's all these things which are happening, right?
Well, by the sounds of it, new schools are being built. And that's important. That's the key. They're keeping up with the increasing population.
100%. The only thing is, that can be a bit frustrating is the pointing system. If you if you're new to market, because you can't really choose which school you go to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you get assigned to school based on your area code.
You need to sort of fill out all these documents, and you get some points, and then depending on your pointing.
Also, it's not directly correlated to your zip code, your postal code rather.
Yes, that gives you points. So obviously it's going to be within your area. So you basically, if you have two kids that go to the same school, then you have more points to go to the same school. So sorry, if you have a child in that school already, you get another point.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
it's a pointing system.
Yeah,
so you can't just say, I'm taking my kid to that school.
Yeah.
At least in Marbella, for example, you have the pointing system. And I believe you also have that in Fuengirola and this sort of Malaga thing, But the nice thing is that we're seeing schools, improve. We're seeing new schools being built, like the one we just referenced in Elviria. But of course, like all areas in the world, it's something which is being worked on, But there is variety. There is variety, and there are different schools. I think for people that don't know Spanish system is a totally different topic. It's a harder school than international schools. It's a lot more in depth. I've been to a Spanish school, and you learn plenty. Infrastructure in schools is generally good. I think that in recent years, talking about higher education, Spain's also invested, or Costa del Sol invested heavily in the university around Malaga. So it's not just about primary and secondary. I think there's some really good variety of universities in Malaga itself. So people traditionally had to travel to Granada, Cordoba to get higher education, and now that exists within Malaga itself. So that's a great sort of point for the infrastructure, or education on Costa del Sol. And now, given that Malaga is such a sort of tech hub, a lot of the universities where you would study like technical degrees or digital degrees regarding online whatever. People get headhunted from these big companies in Malaga, right? And following their higher education in Malaga. So schooling is something that, of course, it needs improving. We need more schools in certain areas. But I think, like, for our population, it's suffice.
Lots of building, a lot of new people, traveling here, relocating here. How does that affect kind of the environmental matters?
It's a really important one. And actually, if you look at Costa del Sol, it's such a sort of natural environment. Like, you have a beautiful mountain, beautiful scenery.
A lot of greenery.
A lot of greenery. You have, beautiful beaches. And the one good thing about our planning is, I think people look at all the cranes and they'll go, oh my God, this is like, everyone's building everywhere. But no, like, they are very well defined urban areas that people can build in. And there are very defined areas where you cannot build.
Well, in fact, you talked about that as a problem in the housing matter, because there are so many no-go zones.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a bit too many, But if you look at I love mountain running. Like, I spend my weekends running the mountain with the kids, and if you look at the mountains of Ojén and the mountains of Marbella, there are so much emphasis put on the environment. So you have like huge efforts or replantation. We had a big fire a few years ago. And, Malaga takes its environment very seriously. So the whole town hall of Ojén did a whole replant of entire mountains. You see these pines growing. The environment's super important to us. And you also see it in all the building permits. So when you're about to build I don't know if you know this or not, but when you build an apartment complex of 50 apartments, imagine you're Metro Bacesa, right?
Yeah.
Every single pine tree and every single alcornoque, which are protected trees, are numbered. So you need to build around it in certain cases. You can't eliminate it. And if you eliminate it, you have to pay such an exorbitant amount of money to replant that plan.
Wow.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any financial sense to knock it down. You actually build around it. And if, for example, if you wanted to prune a pine tree, you need to ask for a permit, and you can't prune it until you get the permit approved. So environment in Malaga is like, they're really, really on the ball with it. Alcornoques are, I don't know what the word alcornoque is, but it's like a cork tree in a way.
That's exactly what they're called.
Cork tree, no?
Yeah.
And for example, the whole mountains of Elviria are full of cork trees. And every single cork tree is numbered. And I'm not joking. Huh? Like, you know, I've known of people that have massive lands in the inlands and they decide to cut a tree in the middle of their garden and they get a fine through the post, which is ridiculous because they will see in the satellite that tree's gone. And that's not a joke.
Wow.
Like they will check, and you've got the environmentalist part of the town halls of every single town hall driving around, checking the trees. Like the trees and, you know, our green zones are part of like our coastline, and they make sure that they're protected. So even though infrastructure and the coasts are growing, there's a very strong emphasis on maintaining our environment sort of friendly, making sure that the animals that live, we have deers here, by the way. Like where I run, we have foxes, deers. We have such a, you know, healthy fauna or, you know, natural animals in our mountains, and we want to make sure that we keep that all healthy. So environment's top concern for our infrastructure.
Do developers have to build to a certain standard now as well?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Energy certificates.
100%. You need to. You can't just build a property that consumes too much electricity.
Is there a minimum standard these days?
I don't know what it is, but I do know that by 2030 or 2032, with the new real estate regulations, is you won't be able to sell or rent any property that has a qualification under a D or an E.
Yeah. Okay,
so like if you don't have like good energy efficiency in your house, you put with bad windows that don't allow you to, you know, that you use too much electricity and you're not really environmental friendly, well, you won't be able to sell your property and you'll have to invest in your property to improve it. That's infrastructure out everywhere. I don't think we missed a beat.
No, I don't think we have either. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for your insights, Kian. That was great.
No problem.
Yeah, if you feel like we missed any topics regarding infrastructure, if you have differing opinions about what we said, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and we'll see you next time. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.